It's week 7. If you have any questions about your lineup or you just want a second opinion, drop it in the comments. But let's get into the waivers. Kicking off here with the defense. Yes, those are important too. Next week, the New Orleans Saints play the Denver Broncos, which is the 4th best matchup for defenses this year. I believe it's a must-win game after losing 4 in a row for the New Orleans Saints. And for the Denver offense, in 6 weeks, they've had 9 turnovers, which of course generates more points for defenses. So the Saints, if they are available, go after them. At the receiver positions, we're going to talk about 2 Packers here. Christian Watson, we'll start off here with, as he's coming off of his best game on the season. Next week, it is going to be a potential shootout at home against a Houston Texans team that scores a lot of points. So if the Packers want to win, I believe they're going to have to match the Houston Texans production. Now, after that, this Houston Texans matchup, they have 2 top 3 matchups for the wide receiver position. They're playing Jacksonville and Detroit, the number 1 and the number 3 matchup. So again, a lot of favorable matchups coming up for these Packers receivers. But Christian Watson won, Romeo Doubs for the same exact reason. He was suspended. We weren't sure if he was going to play, but he played and he had his best game on the season. So both Packers receivers, add that to your list as well. Demario Douglas, look, he's coming off his best game on the season. There's a trend going on here. We like to roll with the hot hand. 6 receptions on 9 targets, which is the big thing. 92 yards and a touchdown, giving us just about 20 fantasy points in full PPR leagues. But Drake May is now the quarterback. It is his era there in New England, and he favored Demario Douglas. Now, Demario Douglas and the Patriots, they're playing Jacksonville next week, which is the number 1 matchup for wide receivers this season. I think Drake May can probably get his first career win next week, and Demario Douglas is going to play a big part in that. So keep him on your radar as well. At the tight end position, look, it's a shaky position. We don't know if we're going to get good production or, I guess, a dud from any tight end across the association on a weekly basis in our fantasy lineups. But what I can say is, again, roll with the hot hand, find consistency where you could find it at this tight end position. Cade Otton is the definition of consistency. Over the last month, he's given us 7 or 8 fantasy points a game. Now, again, that's not amazing production over the last month, but it's a lot better than the majority of tight ends around the league, especially in fantasy football. Now, coming up for Cade Otton, he has 3 top 10 matchups against Baltimore, Atlanta, and Kansas City. On paper, you're saying, oh, and those are tough defenses, but for the tight end position in fantasy, they seem to be favorable matchups. So Cade Otton in a high-powered offense, I like him going forward. Noah Fant, a lot of the same reasons. He's coming off of his best game, but he has a top 10 matchup next week against the Atlanta Falcons. Again, favorable matchup for the tight end position. This Seahawks team, just like the Saints, are in a must-win scenario going forward. They need to score a lot of points to keep up with Atlanta, and they, again, are in a must-win scenario, so they might throw a lot more than usual going forward. So Noah Fant, he's had a couple good games in a row, had his best game last week. Could that continue? We'll have to wait and see. Quick video today, but again, I want to get you guys to the point so we can get these guys on our rosters and continue to dominate and win fantasy football championships. But here's a quick recap with some guys I didn't cover. Daniel Jones, there's not much out there with the quarterback position, but he is owned in just about 50% of leagues, so he might not be there. Just be on the lookout for that. The running backs, Alexander Mattison, he is the clear number 1 running back in Las Vegas now, especially because Aiden O'Connell took over as quarterback 1. Something to look out for. Again, in Yahoo, 51%, ESPN 35. Might be there, might not be, but I think he should be on your roster. Sean Tucker, I mean, the surprise of the year. The running back 1 last week, had over 30 fantasy points. And who was he before the game? I don't know. You don't know. But Sean Tucker, of course, I think it should be on your radar. Now, I will say, with Rachaad White and Bucky Irving in the mix, I don't know how many times he's going to be productive and startable in our fantasy lineups, but, if you have an extra kicker or an extra defense, Sean Tucker could be worth that roster spot. Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, of course, I'm a big believer in that Packers offense. Demario Douglas, of course, Cade Otton and Noah Fant we talked about. Same with the Saints defense. Now, the Saints defense, of course, they are owned in almost 50% of leagues or in 50% in ESPN leagues. So watch out. They might not be there. I'll give you some other matchups in the comments if you need a defense this week. Now at the kicker, it's Will Reichert. Now you can go Jake Bates, who just had his best game for Detroit. You could go Chris Boswell for Pittsburgh, who's been consistent all year. But I like Will Reichert, of course, the kicker for the Minnesota Vikings. They score a lot of points. Of course, more opportunities for our fantasy lineups. But again, before we get out of here, of course, I want to thank you. The 2-year anniversary of this channel just passed. And if you have any questions about your lineup and you just want a second opinion, drop it in the comments. I'll get back to you as quick as I can.